Hello and welcome to the Days of Yore. Today we'll be speaking about the Sir Walter Scott, a ship built at the Fraser shipyard in 1826. My sources today come from the British newspaper Archives. And today, of course, I'll maybe start with my usual ending, and I'll say if you are enjoying this content, do please consider liking this channel, subscribing to the channel, liking the video, giving it the thumbs up, leaving a comment. Any and all that helps us out in a big way. Have a look at the Patreon options in the description box below for an opportunity to see some exclusive content. Right now, Ken and I are doing a 4-part series on the early French settlement of the area, focusing on the Denis family and their role in, again, in that settlement. So you can see that, as well as a number of other series that are available there on a time delay basis, depending upon the level at which you subscribe. So let's begin. So the Sir Walter Scott, obviously getting its name from the very famous early 19th century author. I remember, I think it was in grade 7, I read Ivanhoe. It took me quite a long time. My uncle got it for me, and over the course of a year I read it. It was very interesting, and I think I had kind of spoiled it, though. I kind of read like the Coles Notes version of it, which kind of got me interested in it, and you know, that's it. So it kind of spoiled all like the mistaken identity and all the people that were supposed to be somebody else. I knew about that before I started, so that probably accounted for the fact that I read it kind of slow. But anyway, that's not really important. And this is about, you know, a ship, not about my early middle school reading experiences. So anyway, back to that point. This ship was a 409 tons, weighed in 409 tons, launched in 1826, which of course is very important. This, of course, is the year following the Great Miramichi Fire. And it's also the year in which the island shipyard, the Fraser shipyard, was captured on canvas in probably the most famous depiction of the island and its shipyard. It measured 110 feet by 29 feet by 20 feet and was built by John Kerr. So these were interesting years for the Fraser operation. Obviously, under James Fraser, things had gone quite well. Unfortunately, the Great Miramichi Fire was kind of compounding what was already sort of a difficult situation that John Fraser, James's successor, was dealing with. Obviously, peace in Europe meant that the market for ships was down a little bit. Things were obviously a little bit more, were a little bit slower, I guess, following the end of the Napoleonic Wars. Kind of a general depression sort of, kind of descended over merchant shipping at the time, as we understand it. The demand for timber and all that was not quite as high as it had been in the time when the British Navy was building a large number of ships. And of course, the fire had kind of made things worse. The Fraser letter book, which we were able to come across in the archives of the New Brunswick Museum in St. John, is really littered with, in this time of 1826-27, with a lot of people looking for shipments of timber, which the Frasers were not able to provide or were not able to fill in their entirety. So it did make things hard. And so this was a period where they really needed that kind of upturn in business. And they did think at this time that Sir Walter Scott was the ship that might do that very thing. They felt that the ship was composed of very good materials and was the result of a lot of really quality workmanship. And to give you an idea of how highly that workmanship was valued, 4 carpenters from Scotland had been brought over in order to finish this ship. David Cook, Colin Campbell, John Drake, and Robert Campbell. And these men were paid a combined sum of about 145 pounds sterling. Now that doesn't sound like a lot, but converted to today with adjusted for inflation, that would be $15,105.39. So that is quite a bit more, obviously, but when you really think about it, try to divide it between 4 guys, and for the amount of work that probably would have went into it, I think the Frasers are still really getting a pretty good deal. These 4 gentlemen were returning to Scotland after the construction of the ship, but again, they had obviously been brought in specially to do this kind of work on the yard, and the Sir Walter Scott represented a very good example of the kind of work that they did. So the Fraser operation and the Fraser company felt that if any ship was going to be sold, this one stood a very good chance. It's also worthwhile mentioning that the Frasers were also overcoming a bit of a debacle in 1825, and early 1826 over the James Hunter, which had been built that year and then had become stranded on the bar outside of Escuminac, and there was a whole row over insurance there as well. So again, this, I probably should have mentioned that earlier, but this another point in kind of a general sense of difficulty and a general upset in the Fraser business. So the Sir Walter Scott was loaded and prepared to set sail in July of 1826. Captain Alexander McVicker was put in charge of the ship, and he had been instructed by James de Wolfe Fraser, who was James Fraser's son, that when he got across the ocean, when he reached Liverpool and deposited the ship with James Robertson, for whom the ship had been built, if you were to see John Fraser over there, now John Fraser was obviously the head of operations here at Beaubears, but he was over in Liverpool trying to work some business over there, and Alexander McVicker was told that if he saw John Fraser, he was instructed to recommend every economy in the expenditure of provisions. So really kind of put very simply, he was told to tell John Fraser, take it easy with spending. This is not a time where the Frasers are really feeling flush, not as they had been earlier. So now is the time to economize. Now is the time to spend very wisely, very deliberately, and with a lot of forethought. So like I say, that's kind of where they found themselves. In early 1827, the ship was damaged 25 days out of Pictou in a storm. It sought refuge in the Western Isles of Scotland and was able to get repair. It arrived in Hull. It did a lot of its business out of Hull, and it was there on the 31st of July, 1830. It was sighted traveling between Great Britain and Miramichi on the 2nd of June, 1839, and in 1846, the Sir Walter Scott was lost at sea. It had been wrecked off the coast of Labrador, was driven aground during a snowstorm. Now, the men on board the ship were hopeful that they would be rescued. Being knocked about, having been driven aground, but still not really feeling comfortable exiting the ship and trying to kind of make their way ashore, they tied themselves to the rigging in the hopes that they would be seen. They waited for 2 days. So you can imagine, in the middle of a snowstorm, basically giving up your liberty, giving up your freedom of movement, and tying yourself down in the hopes that you'll be seen and that a ship will come, and then waiting 48 hours and that not being the case. That's a whole different kind of difficult. But there they were. Anyway, they basically decided that after 2 days that they were not going to be rescued. And so what happened was that they made a raft and made for the shore. Now, of course, this, again, in the middle of, in the aftermath of a snowstorm, perhaps by this point, still, that had to be a freezing journey all the way back. They wandered then for days when they did reach the shore before they were found. And unfortunately, as a result of the rigors of this long and protracted affair, all but three of the crew did pass away. And all that remained was the mate and 2 crewmen, the captain and 14 others passed away as a result of the stress and the impact of this long series of events, from the snowstorm to the immersion to the wandering, searching for aid. And so that was the end of the Sir Walter Scott. About 20 years at sea, it was not able to save the Fraser operations. By the time of its destruction, the Frasers had left Wilbur's Island, selling it to Joseph Russell, who by 1846 was soon to leave himself. And so I think we'll leave it there. Again, if you're enjoying this video, do please like it, subscribe to the channel, have a look at those Patreon options, and we will see you next week. We're down now to the final 3 episodes of the Days of Yore before I go on a bit of a hiatus. Next week, we'll be back with the story of a major labor disruption in 1937 that saw 2,000 men walking off their jobs, and it all started right here in Nelson. So I look forward to seeing you then. I've enjoyed the time that we've spent together today. And for the Days of Yore, I've been Dr. Sean McCarthy. Thanks so much.